The market was loud, full of strange smells and brighter colors than Ethan had ever seen. But he kept his head low, moving between stalls and scanning for work signs, his pockets empty and his stomach growling. He stopped when a loud crash came from the far end of the row, two alien males shoving a female warrior back into a pile of crates. They hissed in a language he didn't understand, but their gestures were clear. They wanted her down. Ethan didn't think. His feet moving before his brain, he grabbed a broken pole from the ground and swung it into the back of one alien's legs. The male fell forward with a grunt. The other spun toward Ethan, eyes wide at the sight of a human. The female warrior was already up, feet and us, a blur of speed and muscle, her blade pressed to the second male's throat before he could attack. The first one limped away, shouting curses as both disappeared into the crowd. She turned to Ethan, her eyes a strange silver green, scanning him quickly, her breathing sharp from the fight. Without a word, she stepped close, far too close, her armored chest brushing his shirt, her hands gripping his shoulders. Ethan froze as she tilted her head and pressed the side of her neck against his, her skin warm, a deep, musky scent filling his nose. She rubbed slowly twice before pulling back, her gaze locking on his. The crowd had stopped to watch, whispers spreading fast, heads turning toward them, some alien females staring in shock, some males looking away as if they'd just seen something dangerous. Ethan frowned, wiping his neck, but the scent stayed, heavy and unfamiliar. The warrior grabbed his wrist and pulled him through the market, her grip unshakable. "Hey, what was that?" he asked, stumbling to keep up. "What did you just do to me?" She didn't answer, her eyes scanning the crowd, her steps fast and purposeful. They turned into a narrow alley where the noise of the market faded. She finally released his wrist, her posture still tense. "Thanks for the help back there," she said, her voice low. "But you're an idiot for stepping in." Ethan crossed his arms. "You're welcome, I guess. Now you want to tell me why you just rubbed your neck on me?" "That's weird." Her jaw tightened. "You wouldn't understand," she muttered. Before he could push for an answer, shadows moved at the mouth of the alley, three alien males stepping forward, their builds thick, their weapons plain in sight. They stopped just out of reach, nostrils flaring, eyes narrowing on Ethan. One took a step forward, then froze mid-motion, his gaze shifting to the female warrior, his head dipping slightly in acknowledgement. The tension broke with a strange kind of respect. The males turned and walked away without a word. Ethan looked between them and her, his voice uneasy. "Okay, what is going on? Why did they just leave?" She stared at him for a moment, as if deciding how much to say, then shook her head. "You're marked now. No one will touch you, unless they want to fight with me." He blinked. "Marked? What does that mean? Is that some kind of alien handshake?" Her lips twitched in a humorless smile. "Not even close." They stepped back into the market, but now Ethan noticed the difference. Aliens moved out of their way, some muttering in low voices, a few females glaring at him like he'd stolen something from them. He caught his reflection in a piece of polished metal on a stall wall, his neck still faintly damp where she had rubbed her scent. And for the first time he wondered if he had just gotten himself into something far bigger than a street fight. She didn't slow until they reached the edge of the district, where the buildings grew taller and the streets quieter. She led him toward a heavy metal door set into a stone wall. Inside was a dim, small space that smelled faintly of the same scent she'd left on him. Weapons lined one wall, armor parts stacked neatly on the other. She tossed him a small pack of ration bars. "Eat, you look like you'll fall over." Ethan caught the pack but didn't open it. "I'm not eating until you tell me what's going on." Her silver green eyes fixed on him, unblinking. "In my culture, when a female does what I did, it tells everyone else you're mine. It's a warning." He stared at her, the words slow to sink in. "Yours? As in property?" Her gaze didn't waver. "As in under my protection." Ethan laughed once, nervously. "Great, so I'm your pet?" She stepped closer again, the scent hitting him stronger, her voice firm. "Pet, partner, shield, it doesn't matter what word you use. No one touches what's mine." He swallowed, realizing this wasn't a joke. And from the way the market had reacted, she wasn't exaggerating. Outside, the faint sound of alien voices rose again, and Ethan caught the word human repeated more than once. He moved to the window and saw figures watching the door. His stomach tightened, the ration pack heavy in his hand, whatever this was. He was in it now. And getting out might not be as simple as just walking away. Word had spread fast through the market streets, whispers running like fire. The alien warrior had marked a human, and not just any human, one who had stepped into a fight he didn't understand. Ethan could feel the weight of eyes on him when they stepped outside again. Karen walking ahead with a posture that warned everyone to stay away. The crowd parted, but not without stares, some filled with curiosity, others with hostility. They reached a larger, open square where a ring of alien females stood watching them. The one in the center had deep red skin and long black braids tipped with metal beads. Her expression carried a mocking smile. "Karen," she called, her voice loud and sharp. "So the rumors are true? You claimed a human? Did you run out of warriors worth your time?" Ethan slowed, glancing at Karen, but she didn't answer, her jaw tight. The red-skinned female stepped closer, circling like a predator, her eyes flicking over Ethan in open judgment. "Vecta doesn't understand your choice," she said, speaking of herself in third person. "He looks soft, slow, fragile." Ethan clenched his fists but stayed quiet. Karen's hand lifted slightly, stopping him from speaking. "You want something, Vecta?" Karen asked, her tone flat. A ripple of laughter moved through the watching crowd. Vecta's smile widened. "I challenge you for him, by the law of possession." Ethan's chest tightened, his voice low. "Challenge? For me?" Karen didn't look at him, her focus locked on Vecta. "If you lose," Vecta continued, "he becomes mine, and everyone will know your claim was weak." The crowd's voices rose, chanting for the fight, the energy building like a storm. Karen stepped forward, her presence filling the space. "I accept," she said, and the crowd erupted in cheers, pulling back to form a wide circle. Ethan was pushed to the edge, the air thick with heat and noise. Karen unfastened her shoulder guard, dropping it to the ground, her eyes never leaving Vecta. The fight began with a blur of movement. Vecta lunging first, her twin blades flashing in the sun. Karen dodged and countered with a heavy strike to Vecta's ribs, the sound of impact echoing. Vecta staggered but came back fast, her braids snapping through the air as she spun, slashing low. Karen blocked, the clash of metal ringing out. Ethan's hands tightened into fists, every blow making his heart pound faster. He could see this wasn't just about strength. Every move was about dominance, about proving who had the right to him. The fight grew faster, the crowd shouting with each near hit. Sweat glistened on Karen's arms, her breathing sharp but steady. Vecta's smile had vanished, replaced with a snarl. Vecta feinted left, then struck from the right, her blade grazing Karen's side. The scent of blood sharp in the air. Karen didn't flinch. She used the opening to slam her elbow into Vecta's jaw, sending her sprawling into the dust. The crowd roared, but Vecta pushed herself up, her glare murderous. She charged again, both blades raised. Karen caught one arm, twisted hard, and yanked the weapon free. The other blade stopped an inch from Karen's throat. Time seemed to freeze, Ethan barely breathing. Karen's grip tightened on the stolen weapon, and with a quick motion, she knocked the second blade from Vecta's hand. The fight was over. Vecta on her knees, Karen standing over her with both blades, the crowd chanting Karen's name now. Karen tossed the weapons to the ground, stepping back. "Stay away from what's mine," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Vecta's eyes flicked to Ethan, something between hate and curiosity in her gaze. But she didn't speak. She turned and pushed through the crowd. Disappearing into the market, Ethan exhaled slowly, his voice shaking. "Was that really for me?" Karen looked at him then, her face unreadable. "If I lost, you would belong to her by law." He shook his head. "You're telling me I was almost, what? Owned by that woman?" Her silver green eyes stayed on him. "Yes, and she would not have kept you safe." Ethan followed her as they left the square, the crowd's whispers following them, his mind replaying again and again. The speed, the danger, the way she had defended him like a prize no one else could have. They reached a quieter side street, Karen walking slower now, her breathing calmer. She glanced at him once. "You need to understand something," she said. "Being marked means more than protection. It makes you a target for those who want to take you." Ethan frowned. "So, this isn't over?" Her answer was simple. "It's just beginning." From somewhere behind them, a low laugh echoed through the alley, and Ethan turned to see two alien females watching from the shadows, their eyes locked on him, their expressions hungry in a way that made his stomach twist. Karen stepped between them and him, her hand resting casually on the hilt of her blade. The females backed away, but their gaze didn't soften. Ethan's pulse raced, the reality setting in. He wasn't just walking through an alien city anymore. He was walking with a sign over his head that said, "Taken." And every glance he caught told him not everyone respected the warning. Karen pushed the door closed behind them, the heavy lock sliding into place. She removed her armor piece by piece, her movements sharp, her silver green eyes flicking to Ethan as if measuring his thoughts. "You have questions," she said flatly, tossing a blood-stained cloth into the corner. Ethan stood near the small table, still replaying the fight with Vecta in his head. "Yeah, a few," he said, "starting with what exactly this marking law is and why it makes everyone want to fight you for me." Karen leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "In my culture, when a female marks someone, it is a declaration of possession and protection. It tells others that the one marked is not to be touched without challenge." Ethan shook his head. "So basically, it's like you put a giant property of Karen sign on me?" Her lips twitched, but she didn't smile. "Property, yes, but it's more than that. It's a promise. I am bound to keep you safe, feed you, shelter you, and defend your honor until the bond period ends." He frowned. "And when does it end?" Her gaze darkened. "In 30 rotations, unless I choose to make it permanent." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but movement caught his eye outside the window. A tall alien female walking slowly past, her gaze fixed on the door, her expression sharp and calculating. "She's been circling for an hour," Karen muttered without looking. "They're testing me." He stepped closer to the table, lowering his voice. "Testing you. How?" "By seeing if they can get to you when I'm not looking," she said, pulling a dagger from her belt and setting it on the table between them. "If someone can remove my scent and replace it with theirs before the bonding period ends, the law says you belong to them." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Remove your scent? Like, wash it off?" Her eyes locked on his. "Not just wash, cover it with their own. It means getting close to you, closer than they should be." He thought about the way those females had looked at him in the alley, the way Vecta had spoken as if he was some kind of prize. "So I can't just walk around on my own now?" Her answer was immediate. "Not unless you want to disappear before the sun sets." He didn't argue, not after what he had seen today, but he still hated the feeling of being trapped. That night, Karen sat near the door with her weapon across her knees, her gaze fixed on the shadows beyond the window. Ethan lay on the thin cot against the wall, sleep refusing to come. A sound broke the stillness. Soft footsteps outside, then the faint scrape of metal on stone. Karen was on her feet instantly, pressing a hand to his chest to keep him still. She drew her blade in silence. The door handle shifted, slow, deliberate. Karen swung it open in one motion, catching a hooded figure mid-step. The intruder lunged toward Ethan, a small vial in her hand, the liquid inside shimmering. Karen caught her by the throat and slammed her into the wall, the vial shattering on the ground, the scent rising sharp and sweet, almost dizzying. Ethan coughed, stepping back. Karen snarled something in her own language, her voice low and dangerous. The intruder's eyes widened in fear before Karen shoved her out into the street and slammed the door. She turned to Ethan, breathing hard. "That was an attempt to replace my scent. If she had touched you with that, the claim could be broken." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "So, you weren't kidding. This is real." Her gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. "You're worth more than you realize, not just to me, but to anyone who wants leverage over humans. Your DNA is rare and in the wrong hands." She didn't finish the sentence. He sat down heavily on the cot. "You make it sound like I'm some kind of currency." She didn't answer, just moved to the table and began sharpening her blade, the steady scrape of metal against stone filling the room. The next morning, the market was quieter, but Ethan could still feel eyes on them as they walked. Karen kept him close, her hand occasionally brushing his arm as if reminding the crowd he was marked. At one stall, an alien vendor handed Karen a bundle of dried meat, his eyes flicking to Ethan. "Careful," he said in a low voice. "There's talk that a buyer from off-world has arrived, looking for exotic property." Karen's hand tightened on the bundle. "If he comes near us, he dies," she said simply. They moved on, but Ethan's skin crawled, the reality sinking deeper. This wasn't just about a strange alien tradition, it was about survival. By the time they reached the edge of the market, a group of young alien males had begun to follow them, whispering and laughing. One called out something in their language. Karen didn't turn, but Ethan could see her jaw tighten. They reached a narrow bridge over a shallow canal, and one of the males stepped in front of Ethan, his grin wide. "You smell like her," he said in broken trade tongue, "but I could make you smell better." Before Ethan could react, Karen shoved the male back so hard he stumbled into the water. The others backed away quickly, muttering, "She didn't slow," her voice low as they walked. "This will keep happening. You need to stay where I can see you." Ethan glanced at her, "And if I don't?" Her eyes met his, cold and certain. "Then you won't last the night." The tavern was dim, lit by low amber lights that made every shadow seem longer. Karen led Ethan to a corner table, keeping her back to the wall, her eyes scanning every face in the room. Ethan sat across from her, trying to ignore the way conversations dipped whenever they passed, some aliens pretending not to look, others making no effort to hide their interest. A pair of rough-looking males at the bar spoke in hushed voices, their words too quick for Ethan to follow. But he caught one phrase, "the human prize." Karen's eyes flicked toward them, her expression unreadable. She ordered food in her language, the server giving Ethan a long, slow glance before walking away. "I don't like this," Ethan muttered. "Everyone's staring at me like I'm a bag of gold." "That's because you are," Karen replied quietly, "only rarer and more dangerous to own." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Dangerous for me or for them?" Her silver-green eyes locked on his. "Both." The server returned with 2 plates, setting them down quickly, her gaze sliding between Ethan and Karen, the air tense. Before Ethan could take a bite, the tavern door creaked open. A tall figure in a hood stepping inside, the scent of chemical oils cutting through the warm air. The hood turned toward their table for only a second before moving to the bar. Karen's hand rested lightly on the hilt of her blade, her posture never changing. "Eat," she said softly, "and don't look at him again." Ethan did as told, but his senses were on high alert, the low murmur of voices blending with the clink of mugs and the scrape of chairs. When they left the tavern, the street outside was quiet, too quiet. Karen walked ahead, her steps steady, Ethan following close. Halfway down the street, a shadow broke from an alley, a cloaked figure lunging straight for Ethan, a metallic sprayer in hand. Before Ethan could react, Karen was between them, her blade flashing in the faint light. The attacker's arm fell limp, the sprayer clattering to the ground, a sharp, sweet scent spilling into the air. The attacker staggered back, clutching a wound, Karen's voice a low growl. "Run," she said in her language. The figure hesitated, then turned and fled into the darkness. Ethan stared at the broken sprayer. "That was to cover your scent, wasn't it?" Karen wiped her blade clean on a scrap of cloth. "Yes," she said, "and if it had worked, you'd already be gone." His stomach nodded. "You mean taken?" "Taken?" Her gaze was steady. "Sold." They moved quickly through the streets until they reached her quarters, Karen locking the door behind them, her shoulders tense. "You didn't just mark me to claim me." Ethan said finally, "You did it because you knew someone was after me." Karen set her weapons down, her movements slow. "I saw you in the market before you saw me. There were already eyes on you. I knew they'd move soon." He exhaled sharply. "So I was already a target." Her tone softened just slightly. "Yes, and now at least you have a shield." Ethan sank into the chair, rubbing his face. "You could have just walked away." Karen's answer was immediate. "I could have, but I didn't." The next morning, the market felt different. Less crowded, the air thicker somehow. Karen kept her hand near her weapon, her gaze moving constantly. They stopped at a weapons stall, Karen speaking to the vendor in quick, clipped words, the vendor's eyes darting to Ethan more than once, his face pale. He slipped a small piece of paper into Karen's hand without a word. She read it, her jaw tightening. "They've put a price on you," she said quietly. Ethan blinked. "A bounty?" She folded the paper, sliding it into her armor, "high enough to make even your friends consider selling you." They walked faster, weaving through side streets to avoid the main road, but the sense of being watched never faded. Near the edge of the district, a group of armed figures appeared ahead, blocking the street, their weapons casual but ready. Karen slowed, her voice low. "Stay behind me, no matter what happens." The tallest of the group stepped forward, his grin showing sharp teeth. We don't want trouble, he said in trade tongue, just the human, and you can walk away. Karen's answer was a flash of steel, the fight exploding in an instant. She moved like lightning, her strikes precise and deadly. Ethan pressed himself against the wall, trying to stay out of reach. Out of reach. Two of them broke past her, heading straight for him. Instinct pushed him forward. Grabbing a loose pipe from the ground, he swung hard, catching one in the ribs, the alien crumpling with a gasp. The other reached for him but froze when Karen's blade pressed against his throat from behind. Her breathing sharp. The street fell silent, the survivors retreating quickly, dragging their wounded with them. Karen turned to Ethan, her gaze hard but not unkind. You fought, she said, a note of surprise in her tone. Ethan was still catching his breath. I'm not planning to just stand here and let them take me. Her eyes held his for a long moment, then she nodded once. Good, because this isn't over. Karen stood at the center of the small room, arms folded, her armor laid out neatly beside her. Ethan sat on the edge of the cot, watching her pace. You need to know what's coming, she said, her voice calm but heavy. The bonding trial is in 3 days. It will decide if my claim on you is strong enough to last until the end of the bond period. Ethan frowned. And if you fail, her gaze locked on his, then the claim breaks and you'll be taken by whoever wins the challenge. The weight of her words settled hard in the air. Ethan leaned forward. So this trial, it's a fight? Her lips curved faintly, though there was no humor. It's more than a fight. It's a test of strength, awareness, and loyalty. Both of us will be tested, and you'll be part of it. He blinked. Part of it? I thought you'd be the one fighting. Karen shook her head. They will try to take you from me in the arena. It will be your job to avoid capture while I fight. If they succeed even once, I lose. Ethan exhaled sharply. So I can't just stand there. No. She said, you'll need to move, think, use anything around you as a weapon if you must. For the rest of the day, Karen trained him in the narrow courtyard behind her quarters. She showed him how to break a grip, how to duck under an attack, how to spot an opponent's movement before they struck. Ethan's muscles ached quickly, but he kept going. The image of the market fights fresh in his mind. Every step she taught him felt like it might make the difference between staying with her or being dragged away. That night, she handed him a small curved blade, light and balanced. Keep this with you, she said. Hide it, but never be without it. 2 nights later, the arena was alive with sound, thousands of voices echoing through the stone walls. The floor a wide expanse of sand and scattered obstacles. Ethan followed Karen into the center, the heat of the crowd pressing in, banners waving, alien eyes burning with hunger for the challenge ahead. Across from them stood 3 rival claimants, each with their chosen partners. 2 males and a female, all taller and stronger than Ethan. The arena master, raised a clawed hand, his voice booming. The bonding trial begins. Defend what is yours. The sound that followed was deafening. The challengers rushing forward in a blur of movement. Karen met them head-on, her strikes fast and brutal. Ethan darted toward the nearest cover, a low wall of stone, but one of the rivals broke past Karen and came straight for him. His grin wide. Ethan waited until the last second, then ducked low, ramming his shoulder into the alien's midsection and sending him stumbling. He scrambled away, heart pounding. Karen's blade flashed, dropping one challenger in the sand. But the other 2 pressed hard, one keeping her busy while the other tried to circle around. Ethan saw the trap forming and moved fast, grabbing a handful of loose sand and throwing it into the circling alien's eyes. The rival roared in pain, swinging blindly. The crowd roared with every exchange, the smell of sweat and blood mixing in the hot air. Karen was everywhere at once, blocking, striking, never letting anyone stay close to Ethan for more than a breath. But the rivals didn't quit. They came again and again, testing her stamina, forcing Ethan to keep moving, every second feeling longer than the last. One managed to grab Ethan's arm, pulling hard. Karen was there in an instant, her blade pressed to the rival's neck, her voice cold. Release him. The grip loosened, and the rival backed away. By the final minutes, the sand was littered with weapons, the crowd chanting Karen's name. The arena master raised his hand again. The trial is complete. The claim stands. The sound of the crowd's approval shook the air. Karen lowered her weapon, her breathing heavy but steady. She reached for Ethan's arm, pulling him close as if to show every watching eye that he was hers. They walked out together, the roar of the arena fading behind them, but Ethan could feel the eyes that followed, and he knew this victory didn't end the danger. It only made the prize more valuable. The air in Karen's quarters was thick with the scent of blood and steel. Ethan sat at the table, hands still trembling from the trial. Karen stood near the window, her armor stripped away, a dark bruise spreading along her ribs. "You should rest," he said quietly, but she didn't move, her eyes fixed on the street below. "They won't stop," she murmured. "Not after the trial. Now they know you're worth the risk." Ethan leaned back. "You mean the ones who challenged you today?" Her gaze didn't shift. "Not just them, others too, some from my own clan." He frowned. "I thought the trial proved your claim was strong." "It did," she said, finally turning toward him. "But strength draws enemies, and enemies strike when the law looks away." The night grew colder. Karen lit a small lamp, shadows stretching across the walls. Ethan chewed on a ration bar, trying to ignore the sound of voices outside. A sudden knock at the door broke the quiet, sharp, and urgent. Karen's hand went to her blade. She moved to the side of the door before opening it a crack. An older alien male stood there, his skin marked with deep lines, his voice low. "The council meets at dawn. Your enemies have gathered proof." Karen's jaw tightened. "Proof of what?" "That keeping a human breaks the old accords," he said, glancing past her at Ethan. "They want to strip your rank and take him." Karen closed the door without a word, locking it. Ethan stood. "What does that mean?" "It means they've found a way to make it legal to take you," she said, her voice steady but heavy. He stepped closer. "Then we need to leave." Her head shook. "If we run now, they'll hunt us across every sector. The only way is to face them." Before Ethan could argue, the window shattered inward, a dark shape leaping through. Karen moved faster than thought, slamming the intruder to the ground. The two rolling across the floor in a clash of blades, Ethan grabbed the curved knife she had given him. Another shadow sliding through the broken window. He slashed clumsily, catching the attacker's arm. The alien hissed and retreated. Karen finished her opponent with a swift strike, blood pooling on the floor. She stood breathing hard. "They're getting bolder," she said. They spent the night repairing the window with scrap metal, Karen keeping her weapon close, every sound from the street making Ethan's chest tighten. At dawn, the council chamber was already full, towering pillars carved with alien symbols, the air buzzing with quiet tension. Karen walked in first, Ethan following close. The council leader, a tall female with gold markings across her skin, spoke in a voice that carried to every corner. "Karen, warrior of the fifth caste, you stand accused of violating the accords by claiming a human." Karen's voice was firm. "The accords forbid trade in humans, not protection of one." A murmur ran through the crowd. One of the rivals from the trial stepped forward, holding a small device. "We have evidence," he said, pressing a button, a projection filling the chamber. Ethan in the marketplace, surrounded by watching aliens, Karen's scenting mark fresh on his skin. The rival's voice dripped with false concern. "He is not protected. He is possessed." The council leader's gaze shifted to Ethan. "Do you accept this claim?" Ethan swallowed, the weight of the moment heavy. Every eye on him. Karen didn't speak. She only looked at him, waiting. His voice came out steady. "I'm with her by choice." A ripple of shock moved through the chamber, some voices rising in anger, others in disbelief. Karen stepped forward. "By your own laws, a willing bond cannot be broken." The leader's eyes narrowed. Then he must prove it. A challenge was set immediately. Ethan would have to survive a gauntlet alongside Karen, not as her possession, but as her equal. They were led into a long, winding hall lined with armed opponents. The only way forward was to fight or evade. Karen moved like a storm, cutting down those in their path, Ethan using every move she had taught him to dodge and strike where he could. By the time they reached the end, both were breathing hard, sweat and blood marking their skin. The council leader awaited them, her expression unreadable. "The bond stands," she said finally, "but know this, your enemies will not stop here." Karen's hand found Ethan's shoulder, a rare moment of softness in her touch. They walked out together, the noise of the council fading behind them, each step heavy with the knowledge that the fight for their bond had only begun. The streets were quieter than usual, but Ethan could feel it in his gut. Too quiet. Karen walked ahead, her head turning slightly at every corner, her hand never far from her blade. "They'll make their move soon," she said, her tone calm but certain. They've lost twice. They won't accept it. Ethan adjusted the small blade hidden in his sleeve. Then we're ready. Karen's eyes flicked to him briefly, something like pride in her gaze. Stay close, no matter what. By midday, the sky darkened with heavy clouds, the market almost empty, stalls closing early. They cut through a narrow side street, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. Ethan glanced over his shoulder. 5 figures closing in, their movements deliberate. Karen slowed her pace, her voice low. When they strike, go for the alley to the left. I'll follow. The attack came fast. 2 rushing Karen from the front, 3 breaking toward Ethan. He ducked and rolled to the side, 1 alien grabbing for him. He drove his blade into the attacker's thigh. The alien roared and dropped to 1 knee. Karen's movements were a blur, her strikes quick and brutal, cutting through the first 2, blood staining the stones. She spun to cover Ethan, forcing the remaining attackers back. 1 threw a weighted net, the mesh glowing faintly. Ethan twisted, but it clipped his arm. Karen was on them instantly, severing the net with a single slash. The remaining attackers retreated, vanishing into the maze of streets. Karen's breathing slowed, her eyes scanning for more threats. That was only a test, she said. The real strike will be bigger. They returned to her quarters, reinforcing the door and setting traps along the windows. Karen moved with practiced efficiency, handing Ethan extra water, food, and a spare blade. Night fell, the rain starting in soft sheets, the sound masking smaller noises outside. Ethan lay on the cot, blade in hand, Karen sitting cross-legged near the door. The first sign came as a faint metallic click, then the hiss of something sliding under the door, a small device blinking red. Karen kicked it back into the hall just as it exploded, the blast shaking the walls. The door burst open, a wave of armed figures rushing in. Karen met them head-on, her blade singing through the air. Ethan stayed low, striking at legs and arms when openings appeared. 1 attacker grabbed him from behind. Karen drove her shoulder into the alien, freeing Ethan and slamming the enemy into the wall. The fight became chaos, steel clashing, the scent of blood and smoke filling the room. They were driven back toward the inner wall, Karen blocking 2 attackers at once. Ethan spotting another coming from the side. He tackled the figure, both crashing into the table, wood splintering. The alien snarled, reaching for a hidden weapon. Ethan slammed his blade down, ending the threat. He stumbled back to Karen's side. The last of the attackers fell, silence settling except for their breathing, the floor littered with bodies. Karen's arm was cut, blood dripping down, but her stance was still strong. Ethan pressed a cloth to her wound. You're hurt. She shook her head. Not enough to stop me. They worked quickly to clear the room, dragging the bodies outside into the rain. Karen's eyes lifted to the dark street. They'll keep sending more until they believe you can't be taken. Ethan tightened his grip on his blade. Then we make sure they believe it. 2 days later, Karen led him into the central square, the place packed with onlookers, her voice carrying loud and clear. To anyone still thinking to challenge me, come now. A murmur rippled through the crowd. 3 challengers stepped forward, tall and armed, their eyes fixed on Ethan like hunters spotting prey. Karen didn't wait. She moved first, her strikes calculated and lethal. Ethan dodged between the stalls, forcing the challengers to split their attention. He threw a crate into one's path, slammed the hilt of his blade into another's jaw. Karen cut down the last one herself, the crowd's noise rising into a roar. No one else stepped forward. She pulled Ethan to her side, her voice steady and loud. He belongs to me. By his choice and by my strength, no one takes him. The crowd's reaction was mixed, some muttering in frustration, others nodding in respect, but none challenged her. As they walked away, Ethan glanced at her. Think they'll finally leave us alone? Karen's lips curved faintly. Maybe, but if they don't, we'll make them regret it. They moved through the rain-washed streets together, the city watching but keeping its distance, the mark she had given him still on his skin, now not just a warning, but a vow neither of them planned to break.